evening, you guys. Thank you for joining us for another episode of HERstory in the Making, presented by Women in Fantasy Football, powered by Fantasy Alarm, our show where we highlight up-and-coming women in the industry, whether they're content creators, contributors, journalists, or broadcasters. I'm your host, Britt Flinn, and tonight we have Gemma Martinez. Gemma is of Estadio Fantasy, Football Girls Mexico, and NFL Fantasy in Español. Gemma, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
Hola, Britt. I'm super happy and honored being here in Women of Fantasy Football. Thank you so much for the invitation. Hola a todos.
I love that we have you here. I got the pleasure of meeting you the first time last year at the Fantasy Football Expo. You had such great insight on the panel. I'm very excited that we're going to not only have the panel again this year, but have the panel in the main room for an hour. So it's going to be so much bigger, so much greater. And we're just proud to have you a part of it. We're going international. And speaking of going international, it really intrigued me to learn that you became a football fan in Mexico at such a young age. So tell us a little bit how you got into football in Mexico.
Well, I love football since I was a little girl. I grew up watching the NFL with my dad, my uncles, and my cousins. I'm from Mexicali, which is on the border with the U.S. And the first NFL game that I went was at that time the Jack Murphy or the Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego because it's 2 hours driving from Mexico. Well, from Mexicali. And I remember always have great memories with my family watching the games, uh, making the carne asada and taking some beers with my dad and my uncles. And actually, the Super Bowl was like Christmas in my grandma's house. The first Super Bowl that I remember and stuck in my head was the Super Bowl 23. I was I I was a little girl, but I remember that was 49ers vs Bengals, and I think that it was the 39th second. Joe Montana threw a pass to John Taylor, and the 49ers won, and all my family was so happy. I remember all jumping, hugging, celebrating. That's why for me, football is family. And sometimes when I talk with people outside Mexico, they get surprised when I say them that I like the NFL and fantasy football, because a lot of people think that in Mexico you hardly see the NFL, but the truth is uh, that that we have been following the sport for several decades. In fact, for this Super Bowl 57, the numbers of viewers in Mexico increased by 10% compared to the previous years, and it will be continue growing in the coming of the years. And I love NFL. I think that is the best sport in the world, but
I love that family aspect of the NFL has translated internationally because in the United States, a lot of us, football's family, that's what we do to get together.
yeah.
And it's so refreshing to say that that is your experience growing up as well, that football was family. That's where you have the most memories of football. Were the 49ers your favorite team growing up since you were so close to
Yeah.
California?
Well, I have like a crush. I love the 49ers because, oh, well, my family in that decades, in the 80s, 90s, I grew up with that. But then John Montana got to the Kansas City Chiefs, and I was like, oh my God, why? and then I start to see the Green Bay Packers, Brett Favre. I like him, and I start to cheers for the Green Bay Packers, and then won a Super Bowl, and I was okay. I'm a Green Bay Packer, but because we are 2 hours from San Diego and Chargers were over there, I love the Chargers too, and but I didn't cheer a lot for the Chargers because sorry, but I I didn't like the quarterback Phil Rivers. He never convinced me, and that's why maybe I didn't follow the Chargers and I go to the Packers, and that's why that. That's all.
I love that though. Your allegiances as a kid really translate, and it's very hard to break that, even as an adult, no matter where you go. We do have a couple people in the chat. We've got Girth Brooks. Hello, ladies. We've got Mr. Scampers.
Hello, Mrs. Camper. I love that
Also
picture.
have Mauricio
Hi.
there. Thank you, Mauricio. And we have Toronto Dave. Thank you guys so much for joining us in the chat. But Gemma, I want to get into how did your love for football translate into fantasy football, and how did you get involved in that?
Well, the first time that I heard about fantasy football, it was when I was dating Mauricio. He told me that he wrote about fantasy, and on Tuesday he wrote a column about waivers on a website. Of course, in that time I didn't know that that I didn't know what he was talking about. When he explained it to me, I was surprised. I thought, how is awesome is this? You can be the owner of your own virtual football team. And because I love the NFL, I was, oh my God, I can take this player, I can take this other player and build my team. This is awesome. And then he invited me to be co-owner of one of his teams, and I really enjoyed that. The next year, I realized that I want to have my own team, and I have been playing ever since.
And how many years have you been playing fantasy football?
2014, 8 years.
I love that. That's about the time when I
No,
started. And
9 years. Sorry.
yeah, no, the years have gotten away from us. After 2020, it's like nothing exists anymore, right?
Yes.
So I think that's kind of fun that you started playing because your husband got involved, and then you were very interested because of your love of football. And I love that opened those doors for you. But how did you get started doing content? Because going from playing fantasy football to doing content is a big leap. And when did you decide that was something that you wanted to do?
Well, first of all, I have to mention when I start playing fantasy, I start looking for fantasy content written or explained by women, and I only found a few, like Liz Loza. I remember that she has a website that called Fantasy Football Girl and a podcast. And Stephen Bell with the Injury Report and Fantasy Focus, Stacey Stern, Brandon Marianne Lee, Melissa Jacobs, Jennifer Placenzi. I'm a huge fan of them, and I start reading about what they were doing. And in the pandemic, I started to use Twitter because we were locked up, and I started to follow several accounts that talk about NFL and fantasy. And one of them was Football Girls MX, a women's project in Mexico that talk about football. I started to interact with them, and suddenly Ana Polar and Marian Quintana contact me to generate fantasy content for the project. From the beginning, I told them, thank you very much, but I don't know how to do it. Thank you, but I will not do it. At the time, at that time, I didn't realize that I could generate fantasy content. And not because I didn't want to, I was afraid being crossed out uh, as, as not knowing or pointing it out for generate content because my husband does it. And I say, no, no, no. They keep insisting me, and they told me that they they think about me because they saw potential in me, and I say, me, okay. And that's why when I remember when I start playing fantasy, I was looking for fantasy content written by women, and I only found it in English. And I thought, wait, there's girls support me, and there's no one in Mexico to explain what fantasy is for exclusive women in Spanish. I told them, yes, I could generate fantasy football content for you girls. And because I'm a marketing and design woman, my contribution was making infographics explaining what fantasy was, how fantasy football start, what is ADP, what is rankings, etc. That season I didn't do a live stream because the camera made me nervous, but these girls understand and don't pressure me. Yeah. And in that year, another project called Estadio Fantasy gave me the opportunity to briefly generate the injury report for them on Mondays. So my first season of generating fantasy content was written. The next season, I started generating more content, not only infographics but also videos in Football Girls and some articles focused on women on study fantasy. Because these girls were very supportive, they encouraged me and made me feel that I can do live streaming, and if I get stuck, they will help me. And I started making new things like Facebook Lives and YouTube for Football Girls social media, and it was awesome because that to feel that support is very important if you are starting making content. And also I was just in that year I started making rankings in Fantasy Pros, and the first time that I participate in a Scottish Ball representing football girls was very exciting. And at the same time I was very nervous too because I have I was on the same division with Bunny the Fantasy Queen Bee, Jodie Smith, Scott Simpson, Ken Moody. It was awesome interact with them, and I realized and also I realized in that year that Latin and Hispanic women want to play fantasy, but they didn't know how to play it, or they didn't want to play it for fear or shame of asking something too obvious, and then men can tell them bad things. And that's why in 2021 I proposed to Football Girls to create the first ball 100% for women in Spanish, and it's called the Football Girls Fantasy Ball. It was amazing that in 2022 we had that second edition. 80 women from different countries like US, Mexico, Chile, Panama, Canada participate, and it's very important for me to okay. It's very important to me that women over the world can play and have fun and be competitive in a safe environment for them to continue playing, and also share with them another Twitter's account, podcast articles in the industry because they want to play, they want to learn more. And I don't know if I answer your question, but I think that fantasy have uh, have came to me the opportunity to meet a lot of people all the country in my country and international, and I love that we can be so analytic, competitive, and we can talk seriously about NFL. And at the same time, we can make jokes. And last year, I continued to generate content with Football Girls and Estadio Fantasy. And then NFL Fantasy and Español contact me to generate fantasy content in Spanish. And it was so cool that they want to incorporate a woman into their work team. And in off season, I was making videos like the best wide receivers to start in a draft, tight ends to watch in the season, underrated RBs. And during the season, I have a section called Gemas Ocultas. And that was there are like the sleepers of the week. And because my name is Gemma, in English is gem, where the hiding gems, and they told me that it was a very cool name. Actually, Mauricio proposed that, and I like it. I like it, and I love to make fantasy content, and I love all the fantasy world.
And I think that's so important. You touched on so many important aspects of this entire industry. One, women being intimidated to make content, and then getting out there. And once you do, you realize that you can do it. Two, making content for other women in this space. Just look at the chat right now. Faith is in the chat,
Oh, buenas noches,
like
Faith.
who's very supportive. We have
Oh.
Letitia in the chat. We have Allie in the chat. We've got Wendy in the chat. We have so many great women. We have Brenda in the chat. Well, I clicked on Joey because Joey just popped up there.
Hi, Joey.
Another appreciative. We all love Joey. But there are so many women who appreciate your content and really love what you're doing, and what you're doing has helped everybody reach out and not only realize that they can participate in fantasy football, but that they can create content in this fantasy football space. So what you're doing is so important, and we are so appreciative of you. And it sounds like you have a ton of favorite moments in your career from what you just said in that last segment. But what is the favorite moment in particular of your career so far?
I don't have like a favorite particular moment. I think all 2022 was amazing, and create again football girls fantasy ball, and growing up the numbers of participating women is so gratificated. But also going to the Scottish Light Draft in the headquarters of Trophy Smack in LA, meeting all these people in the industry. The surprise the Scottish was over there. Met finally Kelly, Liz Loza, Lindsay Rose, Samantha, Kendra Valenzuela, Jorge Martin, all this kind of person that I admire. It was awesome. And I didn't believe that I was drafting in the same table that Liz Loza and one of my high school crush, the actor Tom Everett Scott. I remember that I was like taking a picture and sending to my best friends, and they were like, "Oh my God, is Tom Everett Scott drafting with you? Oh my God, it's so cool!" And it was very like I love that moment too. But flying to the expo for the first time and meeting all these people that generate great content that I follow and I admire, it was incredible to hang out, share a beer, make a draft in the Hall of Fame. That I actually made Rachel over there. She was beside me, and going to karaoke night and listen all you people singing with you. And also I remember that you sing beautiful. I hope you sing again in this expo, because really 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 you sing beautiful. And for me, the cherry on the cake, I believe that you make the same way that in Mexico say that in the expo, was meeting you girls. As a fan of you, women of fantasy football, was one of the panels that I want to hear. I remember being in front, seeing you all, and then Kelly was moderating the panel, and he asked me to start up. I was thinking, me when when she said my name, I got very nervous and even thought I wasn't part of the panel. She shared a little bit about what I was making in fantasy football, and she mentioned that I had suggested Bob Long to do the Queen's Classic. I was very flattered and honored when she brought it up. She made me feel very special. And in that panel, I realized that issue of gender equality is very important in not only my country, but worldwide. And that was the first time that I heard about the imposter syndrome. I didn't know it existed, and that several had passed through it, and so did I. And you made such an impact at the expo, and the place was very crowded. I remember. I hope this year, like you said, will be bigger, and I'll be there to support your girls, because I think that the one of the best things that happened to me is making a relationship with and knowing all you girls, because and other men too, right? But meeting you girls was like, oh my God, very important to me, because I generate content. And another thing that I was like, it was awesome, was a dream come true, was going to the Super Bowl. Was absolutely incredible experience. There are no words that can describe that type of feeling that I had. Being on the media day was amazing, was crazy at the same time. You have to uh, actually, I don't know, say, excuse me, I want to ask a question, and all was very crowded. The time to pass so fast that you literally have to fight your way to the front and be able to ask them a question. And I have the opportunity to ask to Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce something about fantasy. It was so awesome. And then the same week, I met the god of fantasy football, Matthew Berry, in Media Road, which is a space where all the media are doing broadcasting. He's so nice and humble. I asked him questions about fantasy, obviously, and we also talk about his book. And all these cool things happen to me. That's why it's very difficult to choose one in a specifically. I think that is pronounced like that. I don't know. To me, I'm very grateful of all the support that I had. Mauricio from Football Girls MX, NFL Fantasy in Español, NFL Mexico, you girls, the entire community. Thank you so much. The 2022 was an amazing season. I can wait for the next season to start.
Well, I can say, I think for everybody else, that we can't wait for the next season to start because we can't wait to see what you've put out there. And
Thank
all
you.
of your success is due in so much part to the quality content that you put out.
Thank
You're
you.
so nice, so wonderful. The content is A plus plus. And so for those of us wanting to kind of get out there and make content of our own, what advice would you give to others trying to create a career in the fantasy sports world? And what do you wish that you knew when you started?
Uh, well, as a woman in a challenge that I have as a woman in Mexico at being in Football Girls MX, we had a deal. We have to deal with some machos who say, you're a woman, you should not talk about sports, or you have to go to the kitchen and wash dishes. And that is so annoying. That is so bad. And all the people that send you DMs, what happened with you? Why are you so mean? Or the people that think that you don't have valid opinion and you are wrong. Sometimes it can feel very personal and can be this occurring when some stranger is trying to invalidate your work. And when you are married to someone who generates content, in my case, people start telling you, I'm sure your husband make your team. She wants to be like him. He gave his rankings and all that stuff. I realize that people can be very rude, and I don't know why. if you don't, I if they don't agree with you on Twitter, they get angry, and sometimes you say goodbye to start a player, but the player gets injury in the game. It doesn't score as many fantasy points for obvious reason, and they get upset and say things to you. But we cannot predict the future. We don't have superpowers, or we don't have a crystal ball to see the future. And I will quote a Taylor Swift song that said, "Hair is gonna hate always." So we have to check it off. And I think in this year I have to make that, because people really can be very mean. And think about women in this industry more seriously. We shouldn't have to qualify ourselves and prove that we know what fantasy football is. I hope one day there should not be like polemic, and we can create content and play fantasy or do something else, and it not be that polemic thing, right? Uh, luckily, yeah, I think that is safe, correct. In in the space that I interact, men support us, and they can be very welcoming and open to this kind, the- get a discussion in a good way, not offensive, and that's very good. But a lot of people that we don't know, that they can be very mean, and they can say a lot of things so bad.
I
And
think
advice, sorry.
no, go ahead. Yeah,
No. Tell me.
this show is about you.
No, tell me, please.
I was just going to bring up everybody. We luckily have so many men in the chat who are so very supportive of you and what you do. And so don't let the haters distract you from what you're doing and all of the good work that you're putting out there, because you have a lot of support right now.
Thank you all. And advice that I can say to the person that they want to start up in football, or in NFL, or fantasy, or whatever they want to do. I think that and you want to be in the industry, you have to focus with an effort. And if it's something that you really wanted to do, try it. Try it. Put yourself out there, make things constant, and be hardworking. Believe in you, be sincere, and be yourself. Don't try to be someone else. I think that is the very wrong path to follow. You have to be yourself and be respectful for every single person, even that with the haters. You have to be respectful too, because we don't know, the world is always making rounds and we don't know. And one of the most important things that I hear in the winter conference in the FGA was from Matthew Berry. He said, make relationship, don't be afraid to make it. And I think that is one of the best advice that I have to tell you, because when I went to the Fantasy Expo, at first I was afraid, but then say, no, these people is so cool. Why am I afraid? I will ask him questions. I'll talk with this person, with another person, and it's you are very I don't know how to say, like, camarada persons. You are very support with fans too.
I think that's excellent advice. And especially for somebody like you and like me who were afraid to get out there and put our content, because you're like, no, we don't do that. I think putting yourself out there and being yourself is the number one most important thing that you can do. And you've obviously shown through all your interactions on Twitter, everybody who's talking in the chat right now, that you have made that impact. So how do you hope that your work will grow the popularity of football in Mexico? And what do you see for yourself going forward?
Mm, I will like that the grow in popularity to be due to the passion that with the content is generated. I don't know if I explained well. Uh, with idea of sending a message that fantasy is for everyone, and that we can create a safe space for everyone too, and that people can realize that with our content, uh, no, that can realize with our content that the NFL is incredible and it's a sport and entertainment too, but fantasy football is very funny. It's very I don't know how to say it. They can enjoy more the NFL, and it's not only just entertainment. It's more. It's more. Fantasy is more. You can get more involved in the NFL because you have to choose players of another teams, and I think that uh, with our content we can approach more people in a positive way to play more fantasy football, and in a s- in a safe space.
And I think the safe space is definitely a thing to hit on, because you've brought up so many times the people at Canton, the people at the FSGA, they're all so welcoming. They're all so open. They all have so much advice. And that goes back on building the relationships that you brought up. And that's just so important. And I love that you keep bringing that up, because I think that that is one of the most important things. But since the show is called Her Story in the Making, we want to know your particular story. Tell us how you see your story continuing, and some goals that you're setting for yourself in the space over the next few years.
As a woman, it fills me with pride to know that little by little we are being considered in the industry. Let's not take out the finger of the line. I hope that you know this like we know in Spanish, because the industry is growing fast. In 2021, Lil Loza uh, was making a show with a Eckler, and to give advice, fantasy advice. How cool is that? And an active NFL player and a football and a fantasy football analyst, what were making history. The, the, when I read that on Twitter, it was, oh my God, this is so amazing. That this woman is talking with a NFL player about fantasy advice. I didn't know that we can approach that, and it's very important for us that don't don't take the finger off the line because of that opportunities that we can have. And as part of the Latin and Hispanic community, it makes me happy to know that every day people of the industry are considering making more fantasy content in Spanish. And bravo por eso. Uh, I'm very proud of that. And having said that, every day it's changing, and I don't want to limit myself doing something. I'm open to the new opportunities and just want to keep learning and growing more. For a long time I had the idea to make a blog and a podcast. I think I have to specify it and give myself the time to do it, but we'll see.
Well, we cannot wait to see all the new things that you do. We're super excited to see how you've grown even over these past couple of years. We're super excited to have you on the show. But unfortunately, we are out of time. Everybody, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you. Gemma, we so appreciate you joining us tonight. Tell everybody where the people can find you.
Well, you can find me on Twitter in underscore Gemma Martinez, Gemma with double M. And here, I think that it said over here. And you can read some articles that I written in Estadio Fantasy and estadiofantasy.com. You can see more fantasy videos on Football Close MX YouTube channel and some content in Twitter in NFL Fantasy ESP. And well, thank you very much for the invitation, me to tell my story here in Women of Fantasy Football. It was an honor, really an honor, to share this space with you, Britt. Thank Josh and all of you who see us. Thank you very much to being here.
Well, it was an honor. It was my pleasure. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us. You guys check back in 2 weeks, same place, same time. We will be back, and let's go. Thank you, Gemma. If I can find the outro video.